today we're going to be talking about this sword from Darksword Armory. It is called the Black Prince, named after the Black Prince of Wales. Now, fun story. Apparently, the sword of the Black Prince of Wales was stolen, but then later they found a sword that looked very similar to the one that he's depicted with, and so they think it may have been his. And this sword from Darksword Armory was based on that sword that was found. Now, something to note about Darksword Armory is that they often do not follow one for one the exact historical piece. They will take inspiration from it, and then they will kind of do their own thing to make it how they want it. If you ever buy one of their swords and you see that there's a discrepancy there, that's why. It's because they want to make it their own. We'll start off by talking about the scabbard, then we'll talk about the hilt, then we'll talk about the edge of the sword, and then finally whether or not I think it's worth the money. So starting off, this is the scabbard. Whether or not it's correct for the time period, again, is a little irrelevant because that's not what they're focused on. They're not focused on creating a one-for-one. If you want something that's correct for the time period, this might not be it for you. But if you just want something that is nice, then I would say, yeah, this scabbard is great. I am a big fan of their scabbards. The stitch work is great, has some good texture here. I did not know how much I was going to like this sword before buying it, but I actually really like this sword, and so I'm a little bummed that I did not get the belt system with it. You can get the scabbard as is, just plain, or for, I want to say around $60, you can upgrade and get their integrated belt system. And had I known how much I was going to love this sword, I definitely would have got that, because this sword is just so much fun, and it's incredibly light. And yeah, spoiler alert, I really like the sword. It has these rain flaps. It is a wood core scabbard, has a metal end bit here. This looks like pretty much all of the scabbards from Darksword Armory. So we'll set that to the side for right now. First, let me go over some overall specs of the sword. The website lists it as 50 inches total, with the blade 39 inches. I can tell you my sword is 50 inches. I'm not sure how they were measuring it, but I measured from the peen block all the way to the tip, and my sword is 50 inches, with my blade being almost 39. It's like 38 and some change, but very close to 39 inches long. As far as weight, they list it as 3 pounds, 2 ounces. I can say mine is a few ounces heavier than that, but just picking it up, this sword feels incredibly light, incredibly maneuverable. If you compare this to the Orca sword I was using a couple weeks ago, both of them are fairly similar in the weight, but this one just feels so much more maneuverable. It's crazy, especially for being 50 inches total. Moving on to the hilt. It is peened, has a peen block. You can make out the peen. There's no crazy hammer marks. I think it looks pretty good overall. There's a few little scuffs here on the pommel. I believe all of their swords are handmade. I was a little worried about this wheel pommel. I thought it might be a little bit uncomfortable because just in general, that's how I feel about wheel pommels. I was pleasantly surprised. This one feels great, even if you're choked up all the way down on the pommel. There's some nice dimension on here. It's not uniform throughout. Has some nice decoration on here, 4 hearts. The grip feels great, very easy to index, very easy to hold on to. The texture is very nice. However, this is going to be my biggest gripe with the sword. If you've seen my unboxing video, one of the first things I talked about was that the seam here felt a little bit rough, especially in comparison to the other sword I have from Darksword Armory, which is their Alexandria sword. That one, you couldn't even feel the seam. And I mentioned that I could, in fact, feel the seam on this one, and that I was worried that it would start coming undone, but I was hopeful that it would. Unfortunately, after just a week's worth of using, and this is not like heavy use, but just, occasionally using it here and there over the course of a week, doing some cut testing, this has already started to unravel. I don't know what I'm going to do with this. I think I might just try to find some sort of like leather glue and glue it down myself and then like press it and hope that it stays. I don't know. But it is a real bummer. This is, I think, the first sword I've ever had do this within a week. Moving on to the crossguard. I did some German master cuts with this one, which I will show during the cutting portion, but I did not thumb the blade directly. For me, it was just easier to put a finger onto the crossguard. There's a slight ridge here, but it's not uncomfortable. On mine, the ridge of the crossguard lines up pretty well with the central ridge of the blade. There is a little bit of a gap between the crossguard and the blade. Hopefully you guys will be able to see that. Historically, gaps in crossguards were a thing. Some people like to see in this price point a much closer fitting. And if that's you, well, then you know that you're going to get a little bit of a gap. To me, this is not the worst I've seen, not the best I've seen. Other than that, really like the crossguard. It has a good thickness. It's very comfortable, has some nice dimension on it. Moving on to the blade. When the blade came, it was a super fine polish. So much so that, and you guys might even be able to make this out now, the oil just doesn't sit well on the blade. It is just so finely polished that it will just basically roll off. It's kind of a little difficult to oil these swords. And so then in some cases, it'll lead to some weird like splotching. I'm not 100% sure what to do about that. So if any of you guys are watching and know the best way to oil a very finely polished blade, let me know. It has a strong central ridge. The ridge doesn't seem to wobble around. It did come sharp. We'll do a quick paper cutting test to see how it was after about a week and a half worth of cutting. Let's try the other side. Ooh, that one tore a little bit. There we go. So definitely can still cut paper. There might be a couple of spots that have dulled Moving on to the cutting portion of this sword. This sword actually was one of the easier swords I've had to cut with. I was actually expecting it to be a little bit more difficult to cut with based off of the pictures that I saw when I was ordering it. I thought it was going to be more of a thrust focused sword, and I was not expecting much in terms of cutting capacity. But this is actually the best sword I had for zero distance cuts, where you're able to put the sword right next to the bottle and then just draw the sword through. I was able to get back-to-back zero distance cuts on opposite sides, which is great. This is, the first sword I've ever actually done that with. It felt much easier to do that type of cut with this sword than it did with the Glamdring sword with the swell in the belly. Again, it is light and maneuverable, so doing some of those double cuts was very easy. Doing cut combinations was very fun. A couple of cuts to a thrust on this one. I thrust through a couple of harder targets, like thicker water bottles, and it went through no problems. This seems like a very nice sword for both cut and thrusting. I'm going to cut with this on a regular basis. One of the reasons it's so light and maneuverable is because it is hollow ground here, which means it still has a strong central ridge like you would on any normal diamond cross section, but then some additional material is taken out. I wonder how that affects the durability long term. I'm not going to do any sort of destructive testing on this one because I like this sword a lot and I want to keep it and continue to use it. Is this sword worth your money, and how much is it? Darksword Armory has a couple of different options. You can get their swords unsharpened, sharpened. You can get it with the integrated belt system or not, depending on what you pick will affect the price. So you can expect to get this sword somewhere between $650 and $750 ballpark rate. Is it worth that? Well, I will tell you, when I bought this, I wasn't sure if it was going to be worth it. And I kind of got it for a review sample because I wanted to test out some more Darksword Armory stuff. So I was thinking like, hey, if this sword just ends up being total trash, it is what it is. At least I got a good review out of it. However, this sword has been so much fun that I would 100% buy this sword again. If I went back in time and I was like, hey, you could spend this much money on the sword, are you still going to want it? Yes, I want it a bunch. This might be, at this point, one of my favorite longswords in my collection, especially for historical pieces. I just really like the way it looks. It gives me some fun Witcher vibes. It's very fun to use. And so for someone like me who loves collecting swords and loves using swords, I would say, yes, this is worth it. If you only have enough money to buy a single sword, I wouldn't say that this is the best sword out there, but this is still tons of fun. And for me, I don't feel like I lost anything by buying it, and I would buy it again. The one thing I do have is that this here with the handle is a total bummer. So I do think if you're buying a sword that's, in that mid-tier price point, which is somewhere between $500 and $800, this on the handle shouldn't be happening. I don't know if Darksword Armory is going to watch any of these, but if they do, I would just hope that they double check this quality stuff here. And it even came with a certificate saying that they checked quality control. It was apparent from me opening it that this ridge seemed a little high, and then I could get a nail in, and just, almost immediately after use, this started coming undone. Hopefully they will check that with their quality control moving forward. And that's the only gripe that I have. Assuming that this is fixed and you don't have this issue, then yes, I would say that this sword is worth it. Hopefully that helps you decide if this is a sword that you want. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you have an incredible rest of your day, and goodbye.